Our life, lived in seclusion, was composed of dull, lengthy days where not much had happened. Fortunately for ourselves, no Imperial soldiers patrolled near our estate in Yokohama, but such is the nature of reclusivity that we knew we were at the mercy of our circumstances, and we had no choice but to cope with it. Sorry for taking so long, Iba. The market was a little busier today than usual. Before I start dinner, why don't we wrap you in some fresh bandages, huh? I called out to him, pulling all the ingredients I purchased from out of my basket, but when I glanced over at Iba, he was preoccupied, lost in the swirl of his thoughts. It took him another minute to acknowledge my arrival.
Chizuru-chan.
What is it?
あなたはいつまでここにいるつもりですか?
His question was unexpected, and his question was unexpected, and its curtness sank like a cold dagger pierced into my chest. What do you mean, how much longer? I was unable to think of a response off the cuff, so I hoped he would clarify to buy myself more time, but he merely offered a blank stare. Okay, well, I had been planning to take care of you until your injuries had fully recovered, Iba. In all honesty, I desired nothing more than to remain at his side, even after his recovery was complete. However, judging from his aloofness, and certainly after hearing how he'd posed the question, I was far more reluctant to let him know my true feelings.
以前、武田さんが言っていたことを覚えていますよね。
There were many things. Which one are you referring to, Iba?
鬼の手が体に馴染むにつれ、あなたの夢を見るようになったと。
Oh. I was taken aback that Iba even had to ask. However, I didn't want to insult Iba by stopping him from making his point, so I feigned ignorance and thought a nod would suffice as an answer.
正直に言いましょう。
Okay.
彼の身に起きたのと同じことが僕の身にも起きています。己の意志にかかわらず、ふとした瞬間、あなたのことが欲しくて仕方がなくなる。あなたの夢を見て目を覚ました朝、何度自分を殺そうと思ったかわかりません。
Oh. My stomach fluttered as Iba confessed his strange, lewd thoughts. I kept my eyes fixed to the ground. I was frozen to the spot, hoping to soothe my nerves in full acknowledgement that I was blushing. Although everything was starting to make sense. Looking back at it, it explained Iba's aggressive behavior all those months ago. Even then, it had felt out of character for a man of his stature.
こうしている今も正気を保つのが精一杯でおかしくなりそうなんです。このままここにいるといつか本当に取り返しがつかないようなことをしてしまうかもしれません。だからあなたはできるだけ早くここを出た方がいい。
Iba, no! Drink my water because talking so much is... Blech. No, Eva, we're not gonna leave your side. Sorry, it's too late for that. The sun is in my eyes. Alright. What? You expect me to abandon you after all that's happened? There's no way I could do that. Eva's eyes were wistful, furrowing above pinched lips. I couldn't imagine how tough it must have been to admit this, but I had to dissuade him either way. Hadn't you heard what wrong one. Hadn't you heard what Motoyama said? The Imperial Army is swarming all over Edo. We have no way of knowing if, eventually, they'll reach Yokohama too. Besides, you aren't in any condition to fight on your own. Your wounds are still healing.
こんな怪我が何だと言うんです。あなたを傷つけてしまうのは僕にとって何より辛いことだというのがわからないんですか。僕はあなたを守るため人でないものになったのに。
Iba clenched his fists, chewing on his lips so intensely I was certain that he'd bite it clean off. Between the traumatic encounter with Takeda and these changes occurring within him, Iba was in a state of mental duress, and any lesser man would have likely buckled from the pressure. But my role wasn't to judge, it was to support him. I don't care. I don't care about what you might do to me, or whatever compulsions you have, Iba. Iba's eyes grew wide with surprise.
Chizuru-chan.
Even if it wasn't what he'd wanted to hear, I thought it more important to express my feelings on the matter, for him to know that I was ready to share his burden. A furious heartbeat raced inside of my chest. If you care to know, I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I left you behind. My well-being is the last thing on my mind, to be honest. So if you could please, let me stay with you for a little while longer. Iba was hesitant to answer right away. I carefully walked close to him, keeping a fixed stare. Will you allow me to change your bandages? His demeanor was still cold and unmoving, save for the swift glance he gave me from his peripheral. Eventually, he pulled up the tight fabric on his sleeves, exposing the fresh scar tissue covering his body. I grazed my fingertips along his skin, tracing a line with my hands as Iba looked at me inquisitively. Alright, all done. You're free to put your clothes back on. I wrapped the blood-soaked bandages in an old cloth and called out to Iba in the other room.
何をされても構わないとさっき言いましたよね。
His sharp tone led me to believe that something was off, and as I turned around instinctively, Iba's left hand lunged for me and thrust me onto the futon and pinned me down with his groin. What? Iba! His suddenness had caught me off guard, and my voice quivered as I squeaked his name. Iba looked me straight in the eye with a piercing gaze, and I could have sworn that they weren't his. Fear sank in the pit of my stomach.
さっき言ったでしょ。
This rude, holy shit.
僕が今まであなたに触れずに来たのは必死で正気を保ってい 嘘を言ってるとでも思ってたんですか？
I couldn't budge, and the more I wiggled, the more tightly he would pin my wrists. Out of reflex, I yelped in pain. Even as I struggled between his legs, Iba showed no signs of hesitation in keeping me restrained. Something eerie lurked behind those cold, glassy eyes, something akin to madness. But the muscles in his face didn't budge. I just looked into his eyes, watching the war rage between his sense of prosperity and his animalistic desires. If he were to submit to those impulses, and if he were to take me here and now, I would. Then Iba's face gradually started moving close to mine, the suspense from which made me shiver. He began nibbling on my face, which tickled as he softly dragged his lips in a curve from my cheek to behind my earlobe. With my arms pinned, there was nothing I could do to stop him, and he began taking deep whiffs of my scent through his nose. I wondered if it would be better to let it happen, and I refrained from struggling just to get it over with. Iba was at the mercy of his demon hand, so as I had promised, it was imperative for me to separate his actions from these demonic impulses accordingly. Something is going boom outside. Is it over? It's gone. I still hear it. Please go away. It's gone. Is that upsetting you?
あなたは本当に僕のためにその身を投げ出すつもりですか?
Ah, there's the Iba we know.
武田さんに手も足も出なかった。こんな僕のために。
His voice was restrained, teetering upon a whisper. Even so, I couldn't sense the potent rage that gave him grief, that screamed from the depths of his soul. Even if these were his honest feelings, and I had put myself at risk by willfully remaining by his side, nothing was worth leaving him, and I couldn't be convinced otherwise. It was why I gave up, and I let him have his way with me. His grip loosened as his hands began to quiver. We shared a tense minute of silence, and Iba heaved a heavy sigh from what I presumed was regret. Iba had released me from under him at last, and he sheepishly stood back up as he muttered softly.
すみません。しばらく部屋の外に出ていてください。今はあなたと冷静に話をできそうにありません。
Without another word, I patted all of the wrinkles out of my clothes and sauntered out of his door. Just before leaving, I turned to look over my shoulder. Iba, does it really help being alone? As expected, my question fell on deaf ears, and I left his room without hearing another peep from him. Luckily for myself, I needed to travel to Yokohama street market to shop for some ingredients. While I appreciated the reprieve from the growing familiarity of the house, I was more so interested in a chance to get some much-needed space from Iba. If Iba hadn't wanted me, then who else would? It was one thing for me to call myself a burden, but something else entirely once it came from Iba's mouth. Had I overstayed my welcome? My heart squeezed inside of my chest as I imagined the thought of us being separated from one another. He was the moon drifting in my heart's vast sky. I was beginning to think that As the thought crossed my mind, a brash voice startled me as I ambled beside some produce.
そこの者、こんなところで何をしている?
Uh-oh. A frightening chill traveled through my spine as I recognized a voice barking in the distance. Once I realized who was speaking, I blocked my face with my hand, hoping he wouldn't see me.
何をしていようが関係ないだろう。あんたらこそ一体何者だ。ほう。どうやら口の聞き方を知らんらしいな。
He's back!
この辺りに旧幕府軍の残党が隠れているという知らせを受けて近くを調べているのだが、貴様の風体見るからに怪しいな。連れ帰って取り調べてやろう。なんだと貴様、その男を捕まえろ。先日上野で騒ぎを起こした将棋隊の生き残りかもしれん。
With a wave of his hand, Takeda ordered a platoon of grunts, clad in Western-style uniforms and pointed straw hats, to bind the hands of the Ronin. Under their hats, their eyes glowed a faint shade of crimson. Without a doubt, these were Furies. The longer I waited here, the bigger the chance of Takeda finding me. I eyed a narrow passageway and ran low to the ground, hoping not to be detected. Now, not even Yokohama was safe. I needed to alert Iba and hurry back to the house. Just as the safe house door came within view,
そこの者、止まれ。
an Imperial soldier barked at me, causing me to split into a state of total panic.
お前、つい先日からここで暮らし始めたそうだな。近くに住む者から聞いたぞ。
I am.
一体何者だ。もしや幕府軍の残党ではあるまいな。
Of course not, sir. Nothing suspicious going on here.
それを取り調べると言っているのだ。ついてこい。
Oh no. What will I tell Iba?
その人ならうちの店で働くことになってる人よ。
It was...
手荒な真似は控えてくれないかしら。
何者だお前は。
私はこの近くでお店をやってるの。新政府軍の皆さんは大切なお客さんだから騒ぎにはしたくないけど、うちの者にぶしつけな真似をするなら容赦はしないわよ。あなた方もこれ以上市政の人たちの反発を買うとまずいことになるのは分かってるでしょ。
The soldier shot a glare at Sen, but she was totally unfazed. He looked over both of his shoulders and sighed, releasing me from his grip.
ならば誤解を招くような行動は控えさせろ。
For a while longer, he glared above Sen and myself and continued along on his patrol.
うまくごまかせたみたいね。少しヒヤヒヤしたけど。
Sen! What are you doing here, Sen?
手紙くれたでしょ。心配して来てみたんだけど、新選組の人たちは江戸を出ちゃうし、あなたや伊庭さんは彼らと別行動をとってるみたいだったから、探すのに時間がかかったわ。
Gosh, I'm so sorry. So much has happened since I last wrote you.
ううん、いいの。責めたわけじゃないのよ。
Sen tilted her heads upwards, eyeing the scaffolding across the top of the house where I'd been staying.
おきく、もう出てきてもいいわよ。
She was up there! Upon Sen's command, a cloaked shadow leapt down from the roof, jolting me unexpectedly.
お久しぶりです、千鶴さん。ご無事で何よりですわ。
Glad to see you're doing well too, Kimikiku.
それで、伊庭さんは元気なの？
Actually... Sen seemingly caught on to my hesitation, thinning her eyes as she spoke in a low tone of voice.
わかった。人目につくと厄介だから、中で話してもいいかしら。
Please come in. Both Sen and Kimikiko nodded, and I ushered them in through the entrance gate.